Greetings, students. This is Dr. Brown. You are looking at one of the slides from a presentation that is for your lesson on Think Sheets. We'll be using Think Sheets all through this semester for EDTC 4001, Computers in the Classroom. I'm going to display this. Let's just look at this a little more closely. A Think Sheet is a tool that you can use for both yourself as a teacher and for students. It's a way of processing information. It's a way of clarifying new ideas on skills in the classroom. It's a way to reflect on what you're supposed to be learning or what your student is supposed to be learning. This model shows the different types of or purposes for a Think Sheet, and you can see like planning the learning event, which would be something like writing a lesson plan, but it's more about the processes involved than a formal lesson plan. It's about tracking student performance. It's about bringing people's thinking into focus, analyzing information, evaluating outcomes. You would use Think Sheets for all these kinds of things. It's about generating a new question or drawing conclusions from data that you receive. And it's about self-reflecting. It's reflecting on what you've done or what the student has done during a classroom lesson or activity. So this is the outcome here. And we're kind of using backward design because this is the end. And so now I'm going to go back to the beginning. Let's go back to slide 1. And there's a lot of text you're going to see on the screen. You can go back and look at these slides at a different time. That's part of the advantage of flipped classrooms. If you have a hard lesson with ideas and concepts that are difficult, just hearing it or viewing it the first time, sometimes you don't get it all, but you have the freedom to go back and revisit these slides to make sure you understand it. I'm putting emphasis on this because I know how valuable Think Sheets are. So, the kinds of things that are used as a tool in the classroom: planning tasks, strategic thinking. That means, what do I need to do? What do my students need to learn? What do I need to do to plan for it? What resources do I need? How do I evaluate outcomes? That's a kind of strategic thinking. And putting that in a chart or just even an outline, that's the type of Think Sheet. Also, Think Sheets help with self-regulation. Many times special education students can have a chart or a calendar to help self-regulate what they're supposed to do. That's the kind of a Think Sheet. And then reflecting on outcomes also is a type of Think Sheet. You can say, what was I supposed to learn? What did I actually learn? How can I improve the learning? If I were a teacher, how could I improve the teaching? That's the type of reflective Think Sheet. So, not anything new. You're familiar with these, but putting it into categories might help you in the future. Now, inquiry-based learning, very important today because of our information-driven society. We have a lot of information, and we have a lot of questions. We need to get answers to questions. We need to use authentic data to answer questions. We need to be self-regulated in the way we gather and evaluate and draw conclusions. And we need to prepare students to be college and career ready. Now, you may have heard of that term, being college and career ready. A lot of that is about self-regulation and being able to figure out problems, being able to follow instructions, being able to read complex information, Those kinds of things prepare a student to be ready for college, ready for a career in the 21st century. Now, with direct instruction, which is what we're most familiar with, and there's not a thing wrong with direct instruction, but a think sheet will help you process that incoming information. It also helps you recall basic facts, and it helps see relationships, make connections. Well, how do you do this? Well, there are special note sheets that you can provide your students, special outlines where they plug in important information that's provided in a lecture. That's the type of think sheet that you would provide with direct instruction. Now, planning. How do you plan for a think sheet? The simplest one that you're, I'm sure, familiar with is the KWL chart. What do we know? What do we want to know? And what have we learned? And it's that 3-column chart that you can fill in those 3 columns, and it very neatly helps a student organize their learning. Now, it also can help direct the kind of data collection and processes used in a laboratory. And this is mainly for science education, but it could be in other areas as well. But if you look at the K part, what do I want to know? Based on that, it determines on what kind of data a student's going to collect to find the answers to what they want to know. When I say data, I'm not talking about numbers, although it could be numerical data, but data also could be qualitative information, an article on gas house emissions or greenhouse emissions. It could be an encyclopedia article, a website that has information on Mercury, the planet Mercury. So that's also data collection. And then the processes in the laboratory, of course, can be laid out and provided for students using lab charts. So that's a planning worksheet, a think sheet. For today, for the 21st century learner, let's say I had the letter H, because you're going to first say, what do I want to know, with a K, and then what do I already know? I'm sorry, excuse me, students. What do I already know, with a K? That's what I already know. With a W, what do I want to know? And then the L in the KWL chart is what have I learned? But there's another letter, H. How do I find out? Because in today's classroom, students have access to so many different types of information, and much of it is digital. So if you're going to use this KWHL chart as a type of think sheet, then you want to stick in the H there, plug in that H, because you need for students to kind of think about how they're going to get their answers. Do they go to the library? Do they ask the media coordinator for help? Do they use a website, and if so, what, and how do they access it? You know the kinds of things they would need to look at. Now, think sheet, how can we find the answers to questions? How can we find out what we want to learn? How did the learning take place? How can we learn more? How will we find the information? I've added these bullets because these are the kinds of things you want to think about. If you were to give a student a KWL chart or a KWHL chart, you don't want to just say, okay, plug into the K, the W, and the L column. You're going to get some blank stares. Instead, you've got to help facilitate their thinking process. And these are the kinds of questions that you can use to help them scaffold them in their thinking. There's also a think sheet to look at performance. And when I say performance, how well a person does on a test, how well they solve a problem, how well they write a paper, how well they complete a calculation on a spreadsheet. These are performances. And so you can use these kinds of think sheets to help them learn more and organize the concepts and the skills in that particular lesson. So let's look at these a little more closely. Focus with brainstorming or focus with questions. Here's a type of think sheet activity where students are going to generate keywords. See, these would be careers, helping careers, right? Medicine, pharmacy, teaching, firefighters, etc. And then putting key terms in a Wordle, or providing them with a Wordle and say, okay, what kind of profession would these words go with? And that's just kind of an introductory focus kind of activity. And then you could have the students search for images representing these keywords. That would be especially good for the lower elementary. So something like Wordle would be a great focus think sheet activity. And then you could start them out with a question. Who are most important community helpers? What is the best career choice for me? You could raise this to like higher levels in middle school, for example, if you plan this right. Now, let's look at a think sheet that helps the student through organizational strategies. You can use thinking maps or spreadsheets or timelines. There are a number of different kinds of think sheets you can find online and use these, especially with textual information, whether it's a chapter in a textbook or a website that you've already reviewed and you know it's appropriate for them to use. And they can plug in, reading and plugging in the information in these different thinking maps. Timelines, there are digital timelines, there's some great ones there. So this is a good think sheet activity. Here is one that's used for analytical reasoning. Now this is probably going to be for older students, or if you use it with primary children, it's the teacher's going to have to guide this and maybe plug in the information using a whiteboard, a smart board, and interactive information. But this is one that was created by a high school social studies teacher, and he shows here in this first column a thesis statement, and then in this column with the blue highlighting, here he's put in the kinds of activities that the student will do as they are reading. They're going to locate keywords, they're going to read and review, they're going to analyze, compare, so on and so forth. And so the student would take a reading passage, and here in this block, this one right here where my cursor's moving, they might enter keywords, they might compare two ideas, but these are the verb activities that they'll be doing for this type of think sheet. In this column, in the green, they're going to have, they're going to define, either they will do it or the teacher will do it, the content that they'll use for their thesis statement. And these could be with chapters, websites, notes packages that are given to them, but this is the content. And then over here, the time period is defined. And so either the teacher enters this information, or for older students, they would enter information, probably guided by the teacher, and then they would analyze the information using these kinds of strategies. Distributed reasoning using think sheets is a kind of shared knowledge activity. And there's been a lot of research done on this, and it shows that when people work together for generating questions and proposing hypotheses and planning experiments, if they do this in a group process, then they are participating in distributed reasoning. And certainly notes have to be recorded for this kind of activity, and small groups in a classroom, same kind of process. But it has to be organized with some kind of recorder, someone responsible for following up with certain tasks. All of that goes under distributed reasoning and is a kind of thinking process. Now, in performance think sheets, you've got, as far as a think sheet is concerned, you can see you've got a checklist, you've got rubrics, you've got a rubric with criteria listed, you could have peer review forms. These are the kinds of things you could use to evaluate outcomes. Now, this wouldn't be for you, the teacher, to use, because you're going to think about this anyway, but your students, as they evaluate each other, this is where their real thinking comes in. And you know that Bloom's taxonomy, the highest level of learning, is evaluation. And so if you evaluate another student or assess the work of another student, then you are definitely going to be thinking about content, skills, processes. And you can do that with these kinds of think sheets. And then there's a self-reflection think sheet. And this is where students keep journals, blogs, and a reflection rubric. Now, what do they think about in these self-reflection think sheets? It is more than just a diary. Here's the kinds of things they would think about. They would review questions, tasks, and ideas in a lesson and write that down. They would think about the answers that they found in their resources, and they would record that by writing it or typing it, entering it in a blog. They would match right answers to their own writing, drawing, or presentation. This means that they're going to perhaps respond to questions that you give them, but then they would compare their answers to information in a carefully selected book chapter or website and make a match. Is what I say matching with what the experts say? And they'd reflect on what they need to change, and then how would this project help me in the future? By writing out and responding to those kinds of questions, they're thinking about what they're supposed to learn. So that brings us back to the model here of all the ways you can prompt your students to think in the classroom. And you can also apply this to yourself. You can use some of these kinds of think sheets for your own classes and help you kind of organize all the many things that you're having to get from those classes that you're currently enrolled in. I hope this was helpful for you, but I do want you to go back and review what's in the slides and also plan for how you'll be using these throughout the semester.